Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast. My name is Philip Heitzen, a 20-year procurement practitioner, former head of procurement and advisor to procurement leaders around the world. I started Art of Procurement to help leaders and their teams access the resources they need to increase their impact through insight-driven procurement. You are listening to our flagship podcast where we pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics and tools that leading procurement teams are using to align their impact with the needs of their business. And today on the show, I welcome Christoph Flöthmann, the co-founder of akirolabs, a new and growing procurement collaboration tool focused on helping procurement professionals develop and execute more impactful supply and category strategies. Christoph has experience both in industry at organizations like Bayer, the World Bank, and DB Schenker, before moving into procurement consulting with KPMG and more latterly at Roland Berger. I invited Christoph on the show to discuss a really interesting study that Akira undertook in partnership with Cognitive Corporate Consulting. The study mapped the procurement tasks performed today to understand which are likely to be automated, which are to be RPA or AI assisted, and what activities we should be focusing on in the future, and what impact that has. What are the downstream impacts of those? So there's a lot to unpack. So let's go straight into our conversation, where I first asked Christoph if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Yeah, so thanks first of all for having me at the show, Phil. It's a pleasure. So, and I really like this question because I think I can get in line with a lot of guests previously, and I have to say procurement chose me. So to summarize a little bit of my background, so I studied management with a major in supply chain management. And I was so intrigued by the topic that I even followed that up with a PhD. So I really love this end-to-end approach, thinking about optimizing it from the source to the end customer, managing the physical flow, the financial flow, and the information flow. So after that, I want to go into practice, and then I chose consulting because you have a steep learning curve usually in the beginning, and I was really eager to now do supply chain management projects. And then I worked for 2 consultancies, and apparently there are not so many SCM projects out there,
Right.
but 80 to 90% are on procurement. So I was basically just stuffed on those projects, and I had to deal with it. But then I realized, obviously there's a huge overlap, and it's also really exciting. So thinking about supplier footprint, also thinking strategically. So where will my customers be? Where should my supplier network be? So there are a lot of overlaps. And I was also lucky. So one of the first project was on digital procurement. So a really innovative, creative project where we also did design thinking workshops. What's the future of procurement and stuff like this. So this was really exciting, and that's how I fell in love with procurement. And now, I'm stuck here.
Now, you're a few years now down the line from getting involved in procurement, and I know that you've got a lot of experience from the consulting perspective you kind of touched on. Most recently, you actually were part of the founding team for an organization called akirolabs. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about kind of what led up to there's this opportunity for procurement to do something different and do something innovative, and then why you felt along with your team that we have a solution in mind that can help us fix that, or that can help us address that.
Yeah, very interesting question. So as you mentioned, so I'm one of the 4 co-founders of akirolabs, which is a B2B SaaS startup for procurement, which was launched only in March. And basically, the motivation behind it was that we saw, from our experience and being in procurement line management, some of the co-founders, some being consultants. So the procurement profession will change in the future. So that some operational tactical tasks will probably be automated, and procurement needs to find another role in the future. And we ask ourselves, what could this role be? And our answer is that the role is more strategic. So procurement has to leverage its unique position, being like the spider in the web, being the function with the most interfaces, so to data, but also stakeholders internally and externally. And by leveraging all this, it can become a strategic advisor to the business and provide business insight and business foresight. And what we do at akirolabs, so it's basically we are developing and launching an AI-enabled collaborative strategic procurement platform to cater for this new role. And what we do is we take a world-class strategic procurement toolkit,
Mm-hmm.
embedded this into an intuitive collaboration workflow, enrich this with relevant external and internal data, like using an AI web crawler to find new innovation in the market, but also using APIs to use spend cube data or
Yeah.
contract data. And then also using, for instance, a business partner survey tool to gather data in a structured way from all business partners.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, we think we can address a white space in the market, which is a solution for strategic procurement. For tactical and operational, there are a lot of great solutions, but now we think it's also time to address this strategic category management process.
Yeah, and it's something that I've had the opportunity to see as well, and I think it's there's a lot of need in the market for it, so we'd definitely encourage anyone to check that out. And we'll put links on how to find Akira Labs in the show notes, and we'll just
Mhm.
talk about that right at the end of the show. What I actually wanted to talk about today, and the reason why I invited you on the show, was because you recently put together a really interesting white paper called "Syncing Procurement Digitization Roadmaps with Next Gen Procurement Skills." Really looking at, as you said before, what's that, the coming together of tech and the human, and what that means for jobs of the future within the procurement space. Now, for some context for listeners, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the what were you trying to understand, kind of the purpose of going out and doing this study, which obviously led to the paper that was written off the back of the study.
Yeah, sure. So the motivation for this white paper was that we see a major disruption of the procurement profession due to digitalization. So the job is and the tasks are totally changing in the future, and this was amplified even by COVID-19. So
Mm-hmm.
suddenly everybody needs to work remotely. You need to use virtual tools to facilitate those remote teams. So it's clear that the tasks the procurement managers perform in the future will change from today, and this is due to the new technology. And we want to understand, so what are the tasks the procurement managers will be performing in the first place, and what of those today's tasks will be automated by
Yeah.
technology or will be augmented, so
Yeah.
forming human AI teams, so to call it. And once you know that, you can derive the skill sets of the next gen procurement skills, as we call them in the paper. And after that, even you can like plan your digitalization roadmap and also
Yeah.
your HR strategies. And this is really the beauty, I think, of the methodology we apply there in the paper, which is the cognitive lens,
Mm-hmm.
which is useful to plan all those or analyze all those different steps I just touched. And I'm sure we can also go in more detail of this methodology.
Yeah, so and I have the paper in front of me. So you essentially listed 175 different procurement tasks, and then ranked those procurement tasks based on what looks like complexity of task, the amount of collaboration that's involved in that task, and then the amount of time it takes to perform that task. And how did you come up with the list of tasks?
Yeah. So first of all, I need to give most of the credit to Dr. Jakob Meinert, who is really the inventor of this methodology. So he invented the cognitive lens during his PhD in cognitive science, but since then has applied this in practice on various projects and is also creating a business around it.
Mm-hmm.
And he also developed this together with companies during his PhD. And what he did was that he sat down for semi-structured interviews with close to 100 category managers in various organizations and asked them, so what kind of tasks do you perform every
Yeah.
day and what kind of tasks do you think you will be performing in the future? Then also answer how much time is allocated to those different tasks. Um, and then ask them to rate the complexity from low to high and the degree of collaboration from low to high to perform this task. And then you have this cognitive lens, so this two-dimensional graph, which you then also can divide into 4 quadrants, 4 areas, as a lot of managers and consultants
Yep.
always like to do. And then you have the task mapped into those 4 different areas, and then you get a understanding of what task could be automated and what task probably will remain with the human.
Mm-hmm. And those are mapped. I'm looking at the chart right now. They're mapped again against complexity and collaboration. So kind of high complexity to low complexity, low collaboration to high collaboration. Um, what were some of the tasks that you found were the most complex or collaborative? Those that, are the most likely that for all the best will in the world, they're going to be maybe technology enabled or assisted, but not necessarily fully automated.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe we can go through some tasks and give one example
Yeah.
per quadrant. So yeah, if you think about this, yeah, x-axis of collaboration and the y-axis of complexity from both from low to high, then you have like a quadrant in the lower left, low complexity, low collaboration, and we call this like routine tasks. And there is, for instance, approving a purchase order or sending a PO.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really simple, and this can be done by one person at the moment. But of course, this is prone for automation.
Yeah.
So then another example for a high complex, low collaboration task. So this is like a complex problem solving task, is doing a spend analysis.
Yeah.
So there we say, so you don't need so much collaboration. Once you have the data on hand, you can create your own dashboard, but it's complex. You have to put some thought on it. Maybe you have to use some formulas, and there you probably are like the human is augmented by technology. So
Yeah.
maybe he has an intelligent dashboard, but still the insights probably will be derived by the category manager himself. So yeah, one example for high collaboration, low complexity. So this is yeah like a collaborative task is defining a sourcing schedule as an
Mm-hmm.
example. So you need the input from everybody. So what one does it fit your schedule, but it's quite a simple task. And of course there are tools to make it easier, but still you have to people have to talk to each other. So this will also be like the ultimate decision will be by the human when the sourcing schedule can happen. And probably the most yeah interesting quadrant is the high complexity, high collaboration quadrant on the top right. And there are really the strategic tasks in there,
Yeah.
like for instance creating and improving category strategies, reviewing and negotiating contracts, or gather business requirements. And there we clearly say, so there you need some tools to augment this. So having, for instance, a collaboration
Mm-hmm.
platform which has advanced analytics tool in there, but this will clearly remain with the human. And that's, for instance, also why we focus on this category management platform with akirolabs, because we need tools exactly for this high complex,
Yeah.
high collaborative tasks.
And what's interesting when you look at the total hours that's worked on some of those tasks, if you imagine kind of a list of 175 tasks, then it is very much skewed on kind of the 80-20, or maybe even like the 95% to the 5% of the vast majority of work is done by 5% of the tasks.
Mhm.
So that's where you're looking at, which was interesting to me in terms of total work effort. At the very top of the list was reviewing and negotiating contracts. Takes the most amount of time of anything that we work on, followed by creating and approving the strategy, gathering the business requirements, and basically negotiating the RFX.
Mhm.
And so those tasks derive so much more time on the docket for a procurement professional than all the other transactional and tactical ones. So it's interesting when you think of the automation of some of those tactical tasks doesn't necessarily free up an awful lot of time, maybe less time than we give it credit for, whereas the opportunity may be in how do we make those tasks that take the longest time more efficient.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. We have to bear in mind a little bit that one of the companies was a really mature one, so
Hmm.
they had automated also a lot of the repetitive
Okay.
tasks already. That's why those scored so low in this example. But I bet there are some companies out there who still spend way too much time on those operational tasks, and there's a lot of potential to move it even more to the upper right.
So those that are showing a low amount of time in the report isn't necessarily reflective of an organization who may be less mature, where the opportunity still exists for them to go and do a lot of that um, automation.
Yeah. Exactly. And so if I guess we would talk about also later where we can find the white paper. So if so all the audience, they can download also this white paper and maybe use this also as a benchmark.
Yeah.
So the numbers which are in there are yeah, taken from a quite mature organization.
Mhm. Um, Now, what you did after mapping the current skills within a procurement professional is then looked at what are the future skills, like the next generation skills from a procurement professional. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about um, what how you determined what those skills will look like, or what are those next gen skills that you believe are important.
Hmm. Yeah, sure. So this is yeah the beauty of the methodology. So that's so after having done the task and activity mapping, now you start thinking about the skills which map to which match those tasks in there. And the first decision we made is that so the for the low complexity, low collaboration quadrant, we said those tasks will be automated.
Yeah.
So the conclusion is you don't need a skill anymore to fulfill those tasks manually. So
Hmm.
this skill set is basically gone. We don't need it anymore, but we need skills to fulfill all the tasks in the other areas. And of course, there are multiple frameworks out there. You can break it down to hundreds of skills and sub skills. But for the sake of clarity and also make it a bit more generalizable, what we have in the paper, we said we settle for seven meta skills,
Hmm.
which will be the next gen procurement skills. And maybe I can just go through those seven and give
Yeah,
a
absolutely. No, I'd love for you to do that.
yeah, okay, perfect. So yeah, the first one we identified is yeah, obviously a collaboration skills. So this comprises agreeableness, friendliness, communication, leadership, and teamwork. So obviously in the future it will be crucial to collaborate with internal business partners or with strategic suppliers, conduct workshops, work virtually in teams. So this will be clearly a course next gen skill.
Hmm.
The second one is complex problem solving, which is the acquisition and application of new knowledge. So we are living in a VUCA world, so we have to adapt to new situations all the time. So you have to manage stakeholders. You need to react like crazy events, like a vessel being stuck
Yeah.
in the Suez Canal. So this hasn't happened before, so it's new, and you have to adapt and react to this situation. So this would be an example for a complex problem solving
And
skill.
and just jumping in, kind of that definition of VUCA, it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. For those that haven't heard that term before.
Exactly, yeah. So the next one is a digital fluency. So, and this is really laying the foundation to being in command with all the new tools which are popping up. So, of course, if RPA takes over some of the operational tasks, you still need to monitor them and sometimes check the RPA if everything is working.
Yeah.
But then, if you use like a collaboration platform or an advanced analytics tool, you need some digital fluency to work with that tool. The fourth one is visionary thinking, which is really being proactive, creating output from scratch, and thinking long term, more strategic. So, if we take this Suez Canal example again, so once you have coped with the immediate actions, so you need to like take a step back and think, okay, what does this mean for the future?
Yeah.
What could be like long term risk mitigation plans? To ensure we are prepared the next time, and this could be then developing a second supplier locally, so you're
Hmm.
not dependent on this global supply chain.
Yeah,
as
thinking
an
about
example.
scenario planning and all those things that so you can be proactive. You can build proactivity into your strategies as opposed to being reactive, which I think a lot of us are still stuck in for a lot of the time with the category strategies that we have.
Yeah, exactly. Totally right. Yeah. The fifth one is capacity for change. So it's a bit more esoteric one, so to say, but it basically means it's about embracing change, being open to doing things differently than in the past. Because, yeah, as mentioned in this VUCA world, everything will change and change quicker and quicker.
Yep.
So you always have to adapt and also be open to new knowledge and doing stuff differently than in the past. So this is a core skill for the future. Also, the sixth one, ability to resonate, it's going into a similar direction, is a bit intangible, but what it means is the ability to being focused, mindful, caring for relationship, being in self-control. And this is also one skill from the OECD, a goal for lifelong learning. So if you have the
Mhm.
ability to resonate, you will be able to learn and adapt to new situations along the way. Yeah, and last but not least, the seventh one is resource management, and that's really about managing your available resources, target setting, time management, also like making trade-off decisions. So when do I do like a large-scale project, a transformation project, or when do I run a pilot or a proof of concept
Yeah.
to find a workaround or to be a bit more quicker. So this will be also crucial in the future.
Yeah, and while the definitions may be different, we have a kind of a model as well on future procurement skills, which really ties totally into some of the things that you talked about here. You know, we're very strong believers in that too, and it's almost like taking the procurement out of the procurement professional in a way.
Mhm.
You know, those things that we brought up with that maybe as we've professionalized over the last 20 years, we've seen as being really important and not necessarily as important going forward. And that's not to say that that we shouldn't be focusing on traditional procurement skills, but it's all about how do we amplify those traditional procurement skills. And that's really where being curious, having the open mind, thinking differently, imagining the art of the possible, a lot of things that kind of go beyond the traditional borders of perhaps, hey, I'm procurement, this is my process, this is my policy, and these are the limits that I work within. We really want to encourage people to kind of take those blinkers off, if you will, and just reimagine the role that you can have in your organization.
Exactly.
Because
That's
one of the things we see is that the organization isn't going to ask for it, so it's on us to be showing through our actions, which are driven by our mindset, to demonstrate what we can do.
mhm. That's totally right. So I also I had one example from a customer we had a demo with some months ago, and he said also they have some suppliers which are also business partners, and so he was like had a meeting with a board where they just wanted to talk about like the strategic alliance with this business partner, and he came from procurement like proactively with
Hmm.
a one pager or two pager of some basic or KPIs and facts and figures which they had like in their procurement database because this was also a supplier, and the CEO was really impressed that this information was already in the company and that procurement proactively could provide this information, which then could lead to a better strategic decision of the entire board.
Right.
And this is like a role procurement can go into, but they have to do, as you mentioned, to do that on their own. They will not be asked for that.
Right. No, it's definitely forward, like being proactive from a procurement perspective first. Um, as you went through all the results, and looked at the tasks, were there any tasks that do you think that a procurement professional or leader listening today may think, hey, that's never going to go away? I'm always going to be tasked with doing that as a procurement professional, that actually may be more of a candidate for automation than they imagine. Um, I'm trying to think of if there's. Oftentimes we think, well, I'm really good at doing this. I have an impact doing it, so it will never go away. But that's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah, exactly. So what I think. so every task can be questioned. So is this like the best way of doing it? So, and I really like we unfortunately we don't have this in the German language, but you in the English language, so you have this differentiation between digitalization and digitization.
Yeah.
And I think this is the really the right approach, because I think digitization is doing like this manual process like now digitally,
Yeah.
but it's the same steps in the same order.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of maybe procurement managers think, okay, I have my process. This will now be digitized, but I'm still in control of this process, and it will remain with procurement.
Mm-hmm.
But digitalization is what is one step further, where you really question everything. So everything basically is a greenfield again, and you think, so now bearing in mind the newest technology, digital tools, how would this process or concept be designed in the best way? And then it could happen that you say, okay, instead of a process through procurement, I have a platform with digital tools, and all the business partners are on that platform, and they can issue an RFQ or so automatically themselves, because it's so easy nowadays with the tools. And suddenly, with this disruptive digitalization concept, procurement is out of the game.
Right.
So, so that's why we said, okay, try to find this new role, and this new role is probably the strategic one.
Yeah, I love that term. Everything is a greenfield again. You know, if and I've not really heard it put like that before, but if there's anything that kind of summarizes the opportunity for procurement right now, that's it.
Mhm.
And that just even thinking about it in that term completely blows away all the preconceived ideas and notions that we've had on all the things that we did and how we did them before, to just think beyond that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to start wrapping up, and I just wonder, as you kind of went through the report, there was some actions or any recommended ways that you have in how people can use the information that you've been able to put together in this study.
Yeah, so I think we tried to, although this was based on like a scientific method, then applied in practice for several years, we really tried to write the white paper really hands-on and straightforward. And for instance, also in the later section, we have really some hands-on advices, how, for instance, you can derive then your HR action plan. And there
Mm-hmm.
are, for instance, advices in it like be more agile, to maybe apply some lean startup principles. So instead of having like in a corporation large scale transformation projects, maybe even with consultants, just think of doing a pilot, a POC
Yeah.
with one step in the process or at one office location, and if it works, then tell about it, and then roll it out maybe to the next one. So we give really hands-on advices like this, or also leveraging for in terms of education, the new tools like Udemy, Udacity. So you
Mm-hmm.
can sign up for a nano degree course there. It's also really cheap. And then within weeks, you have upskilled maybe your
Yeah.
selective workforce for using advanced analytics, or using Python to crawl a database, something like this. And also, yeah, the concept of the cognitive lens. Once you have understood it, reading the paper, I think you can also easily apply this also in your organization. Or of course, you can always reach out to me and Jakob,
Mm-hmm.
who's the co-author of the white paper.
Well, I think it's a paper that everybody should read. That's why I was really interested in talking about it today, especially when it comes to the tasks and thinking about the tasks today versus the tasks tomorrow, and all the knock-on effect that that has, and how we need to be ahead of the game. We always say that if we don't move quickly enough, then somebody outside of procurement will get. There'll be a conversation with a salesperson, with the CEO or the CFO or the CIO, that says, I've got this new technology that's going to, you don't need procurement anymore. And if it's not procurement that's leading that discussion, then we don't have any control in how that conversation is going to end. So the sooner that we start doing it and putting these ideas forward, I think the better, in terms of the repositioning of the procurement function.
Definitely. Yeah.
So if folks would like to download the white paper, if they'd like to reach out and contact you directly, where are some of the places that they can do that?
Yeah, sure. It's please feel free to reach out to me on various channels. So you can find me on LinkedIn as Christoph Flöthmann. I'm sure the name will be written down next to the podcast, so you know how to spell it. Or you can send me an email at christoph@akirolabs.com, Christoph with CH and PH in the end. Or you can find our akirolabs LinkedIn page, or our website akirolabs.com, where also the white paper can be downloaded.
Okay, great. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include all those links in the show notes for today's episode. Anybody can go and see all the show notes for all the past Art of Procurement podcasts just by going to artofprocurement.com/podcast. If you're doing that, within a few weeks of this being published, you'll see that on the front page. If not, just scroll down and you'll find the podcast with Christoph. And you can get all the show notes links there. So, Christoph, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure for being here.
Thank you. I want to thank you for listening into today's episode of The Art of Procurement. To go deeper, including access to transcripts and actionable outtakes from the podcast, join the free level of our AOP Mastermind community. To learn more, go to artofprocurement.com/mastermind. And to find our entire back catalogue of almost 400 episodes, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast.